welcome to VIP Boxing's latest podcast. I think we're on episode 456 of Bell to Bell this week. Thanks for watching on YouTube, and if you've downloaded for a listen on iTunes and Spotify, thanks even more to everyone who's left a review, particularly on iTunes. I think we were in at 34 or 35 on the iTunes British podcast charts the other day, John tells me, which is no mean feat when you consider all the stuff out there. So thanks for everyone who's listening on iTunes when you're on your way to work, or as John Evans would say, taking your dog for a walk. It's really good of you, and we appreciate it. You know me, Steve Lillis. You know John Evans with a VIP sweat top on. He loves modelling now. I think he's just after some new stuff from Woody. You're okay down the road there, John?
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. A big weekend for Northwest Boxing, wasn't it, this weekend? Had some lads in some big fights, so we'll talk about that.
Great weekend, and we'll be talking about that. Well, it's been a great weekend. Not maybe the results people wanted, but it was still a great weekend. Great explosive fights. A special guest this week, a man who's been very relevant to what's happened over the weekend. He's making his second Bell to Bell appearance. Top trainer, the second most famous man in Bolton after Amir Khan, Alex Matvienko.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite, boys.
Thanks for coming on, mate. Alex, look, we're going to talk about Jack Flatley's fight against Kerman Lejarraga later on. I know you're keen to make that the final round of this week's podcast, but I'm guessing, just one question on it, I'm guessing you've got a mixture of disappointment and pride right now as we talk about it, because your man lost, but he put so much into that fight, and he's come out, and there's still... You know, he comes back, I was talking to Steve Wood this morning. He comes back, gets a win somewhere in a 6-rounder on one of your bills or one of Steve's bills. He's back in the title picture again. Yeah,
completely. I think he's made himself a bit of a household name, obviously on a big platform, showed just massive amounts of heart and courage and will to win. And for us as boxing fans and people around who are watching it, you know, who could not have felt for him in that performance, so yeah, I'm sure the doors will open. People might look at him and think, am I at that level? I want to fight Jack Flatley, or we want to bring him back anyway and obviously do our job and get him a title. So yeah, it's not a loss, is it? It's just a learning curve. It's just part of the journey.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that later, but we're coming up to Christmas. Are you busy before Christmas with anyone out on Steve Wood shows or anywhere else?
Yeah, but we've got I've got a couple of lads on the road now. So I've got young Mikey Young. He's super fly around that weight. He's fighting on Chris Sanigar's show next week. Gets through that fine. He's going to be fighting Ricky Starkey, one of the Road Warriors.
Oh, when's that? When's that fight?
That's the infamous Jolly Boys.
Oh, mate, you know what? They're the fights. They're the fights that look at John Evans smiling. They're the fights. You know what? If I'm due to be going away that weekend, but I don't think I am now because of all these jabs and stuff you got to have. Yeah. I don't usually go to the Jolly Boys, so I'm not a boozer. That's the sort of fight I'm going to rock up for. Look at John Evans' reaction there.
Oh, I love it. Ricky Starkey's round the bend, didn't he? If you ever spoke to Ricky, and for putting him in my home corner, aren't they? So he'll be that'll be his world title fight.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Right. I tell you what, you better get your guy through his 4 rounds next week. Otherwise, I'm falling out with you. So will Steve Wood. So will everybody fall out with you if you don't get him through 4 rounds.
I know. Well, Mike is a good little fighter. He's a good listener, and he's won one on the road. He drew one. Which I thought was dubious, and he can look after himself. So he's going to go down to Chrissy's show. He's still going to go for that win, and then hopefully comes out unscathed and has a good end to the year with Ricky.
What a 50-50. I love it.
Crack at that.
Right.
Have you found it this year, Alex? I was talking to a couple of trainers yesterday, and with home fighters, not opponents, home fighters, and they was pleasantly surprised at how busy they've been this year. The lads have managed to get out often. How have you found it?
Steve Wood's done a tremendous job. As always, he's putting 2 shows a week on at the moment on average. And luckily we've been doing co-promotions with him at Bolton. It takes a bit of pressure off Steve then, instead of Steve, because he's got like Jed helping him and stuff, but he's a bit of a one-man band, and I don't know how he does it. So, we've been helping at Bolton, trying to bring some sponsorships in. make it a bit more easier on expenses. We're having bring more foreigners in. There's less opponents about, and but hopefully it's making life a little easier for Steve. And he's kept so many fighters in the Northwest busy just recently, never mind over the last 20 odd years, but just recently he's had so many shows in Liverpool, Leeds, Bolton, and he's still going right up until the Jolly Boys, the last Sunday before Christmas. So yeah, it's been unreal to see the lads out. We've had a lot of our lads out, like I say, thanks to Steve. Not just on Steve's, we had a lad on Fight Zone. We've had obviously Jack on DAZN. So yeah, it's been good, to be honest. Yeah.
And just one final question before we kick on with the pod. You've promoted a couple of shows. Does that mean there's less Christmas presents this year for the family because you're doing your dough with no TV?
We just about broke even. Just about.
That's not bad then.
Yeah, it helps with the sponsorship. I'm trying to bring to the plate, because Steve brings everything. He's got his experience and everything, and maybe I can bring something slightly a bit different. I'm trying to bring some sponsorships, get some people involved. I've got some a good community at the gym. They all get involved and support. So yeah, we've just done all right this Christmas. So the girls will have a couple of selection boxes.
Brilliant. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll kick on. We've got plenty to talk about. John, have you got your bell and your timer ready? I'm going to start the pod this week. You ready, John?
Let's go.
Going the extra yard. Anthony Yarde went that over the weekend with his stoppage or knockout of Lyndon Arthur. I just thought Yarde was superb, absolutely brilliant. I just think his shot selection was good. Little changes. His feet, his aggression without waiting for Lyndon was fantastic. And I'm just thinking, without dwelling too much on the fight, if he had been showing this from day one in his career, we'd be talking about one of the most exciting light heavyweights in the world, and people would want to see him, because we've seen so often when he's been knocking these average Europeans out, he'd go through the motions for 4 rounds, see what he's got to do, step it up a bit and blow him away. He vowed after that last Lyndon fight, the first Lyndon fight, he'd just go for the knockout all the time. And I took it with a pinch of salt because of how we'd seen him perform in the past when he's won fights. But that was fantastic last night. And I tell you what, I'd give him a great chance a massive chance against Joe Smith or Callum Johnson now. And I think all them little changes, I know Tundi's at the front, that them changes never been brought in before. It's not just a coincidence that an old stager like James Cook is suddenly around him, just making small changes that maybe 10% that he needed to make him a genuine world champion in the making. He can still become a world champion, I believe.
Yeah, I thought he was brilliant. And a lot of the doubts we've had about Yarde being explosive, and can he do it over 12? Will he tire? That the muscle he carries around, will that sap him? But last night he went for it from get-go, didn't he? But that could have also proved to be a dangerous fight if he had blown himself out after 3 rounds. You don't want to be fighting Lyndon Arthur with that jab if you're tired, do you? And your explosiveness has gone. So he must be confident and must believe in his gas tank. If we've got this new seek and destroy Yarde from opening belly, he's a serious problem for everyone, isn't he?
I think it's another exciting person. You mentioned Callum Johnson, you mentioned Joe Smith, and it was a strange one, the first fight. It looked like Lyndon boxed with one hand. I'm not even sure if he actually did, but Yarde just looks a different animal in there. Maybe James Cook inspired him. Maybe he thought, I've got to go and do it, seek and destroy. Something's definitely changed in his mindset. And he picked his punches well, and that body shot when he was on the ropes, that was a crippling body shot, very accurate, good power. He did look really dangerous, and we know he's dangerous. He dropped Kovalev, didn't he? So it's obviously dangerous, but yeah, he looked the part yesterday.
And also that was almost, last chance saloon for Anthony in that fight, because if he'd lost second time to Lyndon Arthur, he'd be 2 years down the road, but got to stop. Over to you, John, and another fight from last night, Hamzah Sheeraz.
Yeah, Hamzah Sheeraz should have been disqualified in that fight with Bradley Skeet. Bradley was brilliant he just knew too much for Hamzah, didn't he? He was having it all his own way, really. He was dictating everything. Hamzah got it completely wrong, and Bradley was taking advantage. And at 34, he began to tire a little bit, and Hamzah got closer with that strength. But Bradley was well on the way to winning there. It was a legitimate shot that put him down, but you can excuse the first one because Bradley was on his way. But the next two were...
The third one,
excusable. And the third one was the hardest of a lot. You know, so he wasn't trying to pull back and it was natural. The third one he really laced into. It was extremely similar to Roy Jones and Montel Griffin, where he'd had a frustrating 8-9 rounds, finally caught up with him. And it was even the same shot, you know, a right hook. And I thought it took everything away from Bradley. Bradley's not of a mind to roll around, play act and get a disqualification. He's probably not that sort of character, but it shouldn't even have been in Bradley's hands. That should have been an instant disqualification, that.
Yeah. You use the Roy Jones and Montel, but I was thinking a lot of Terry Norris. You know, Terry, he had about 3 or 4 disqualifications. I think Luis Santana was
that was the one. You know, that was the 3-fight series.
I think it was twice. Twice he got disqualified. You know, he was hot-headed. I think with Hamzah, it was a sign of frustration, maybe, as John said. Not necessarily like Terry Norris really did have a seek and destroy attitude. He really did want to hurt people. And Hamzah's a good fighter. He's been our Jimmy sparred. But I do feel, as John was saying, it was a sign of frustration maybe. And Steve Gray's a great referee, but he probably made the wrong call on that.
He got the call badly wrong. The third punch was a shocker. Absolute disqualification. You know, his feet were slowing, so he may have got to him. I don't think he did, but his feet were slowing. Who knows what could have happened? I still would have gone with Bradley, but it took me back to Jamie Moore, Michael Jones, when Ray Farrell, was that the second fight they had, was it? And Ray Farrell told Michael Jones to stay down. And you know what? People are slaughtering me for it. Dominic Ingle should have told him to stay down. He would have got the disqualification. But it's not in Bradley's nature. It's the sort of bloke he is. And you know what? And I think he does deserve the rematch. Whether he gets it is a totally another matter altogether. But I don't think they'll rush to give him that.
No, it's a bad one for Hamzah as well, isn't it? Because Hamzah, you know, that was set up. Let's not mess around. That was a setup for Hamzah to look good, wasn't it? And really put himself on the scene, and it didn't go very well. That, so I think we'll look to find Hamzah another opponent who he can look good against.
Round 3, Alex is feeling generous towards John. He wants to talk about the 1980s. Away you go, Alex.
Well, you mentioned what topic. I was half asleep when obviously he asked me, and I thought, you know what, one thing what I always chat about with John, if we ever catch up, or one thing I do like watching is the heavyweights. I mean, at the moment, we've got some great heavyweights just in our country, but I don't think we're ever going to beat the 80s and 90s heavyweights of your likes of your top ones like your Greg Page and people like that. And then your lower, small, you call them maybe small or whatever, and you've got obviously your David Eisens who were coming through. Your there's just so many. Your Burt Coopers obviously was on the fringe, and there's too many. It's endless, and I know John knows his heavyweights, and we can talk all day about it. And there's some funny stories as well. You know, there's all sorts of things you hear about Don King, and there was a guy called Ricky Parker who was a bad promoter who poisoned one of his fighters in a fight, and you know, there's so many stories. I know John probably knows half of them as well. And I thought, you know what? Everyone likes talking about the 80s heavyweights. It'd be nice to hear what you think as well, Steve. I know I've had the subject with John, but what did you like about the 80s and 90s?
I loved it. First thing you said that, it's mad to think one of my 80s heroes, or my favourite fighter of all time, is Evander Holyfield. And it's mad to think that he won his first cruiserweight title in the 80s, unified it before going to heavyweight, and he's still going. But you know what? I loved what, I mean, I come up from watching small box in the early 80s. Great friend of mine, Harry Cowart, TP Jenkins, guys like that in London area, small ball. Monday night fights, Denny Mancini did. But I love British boxing. It's what I thrive on, what I've made my living out of. So I'll always go for that. I love the 80s with Frank Bruno nights. You can go on about opponents and all that, but when Bruno was fighting on a Wednesday night at Wembley or the Royal Albert Hall, there was a genuine feeling everywhere you went. In London, because I'm living back home then, and it was special. He was back page news, and what, all the stick he used to get, but he was a good heavyweight. I'm telling you, a good heavyweight. And the things I remember in the early 80s, going to see Gary Mason fight Bobby Wells around 81, Southwest Deals. Wells then beat him because Gary had been out partying all weekend as he loved. And Wells went on, won a bronze at the Olympics. That's what I talk about the 80s. John Evans, you got about half a minute, I should think.
I love those guys. I love those fellas. They're all mad as well, weren't they, for various different reasons?
Yeah, even Gary Mason. Lovely Gary, mad.
They were all smaller and they were more athletic. And I honestly think they were so talented. So talented. When you look at fellas like John Tate, there's another one plucking out of thin air. Imagine him in this era now. He'd be right in the mix. But... we're all lunatics. Like Alex says, we're out of time, but some great stories if you look it up, and brilliant fights as well. It was a good era.
I've got some great mate. Anyway. Round 4, back to me. Probellum, the new show in town. It's the way they've operated, it's enviable, I guess. The way they've announced all their talent that's going to work for them, but no one knows what they're going to broadcast on. They start next week in Dubai with Sonny Edwards against Jason Mummer, his mandatory challenger for his world flyweight title. Paul Butler challenges Casimero, another Filipino. And I'm just wondering what you think their plans are in boxing, because they're announcing all these signings. They're with different promoters, they're promoting, managing, and I'm just fascinated. Every day there's a new press release from another signing. They're working with Ghanaian, Ugandan, Australian promoters, Latvian, Finnish. They're coming up to in Britain in 2 weeks. They're launching in Sunderland. They're working with Sam Kynock in Scotland. It looks to me like they're planning a takeover of boxing.
It does, doesn't it? It's all over the globe they're starting up. I wonder if they're going to be putting them on their own shows or whether they're just going to be letting fighters out to other shows. And so virtually every fighter will have some sort of connection to Probellum. But they're starting off in Sunderland, aren't they? And it's pretty small. They're going to Rainton Meadows, aren't they, with Lewis Ritson and stuff. So they're not coming in big and doing big events in Britain. They're starting off very small, which surprised me. I thought they might have come in with a big bang. But like you say, obviously the money's there. Everyone seems to be joining. If you text people about what the plans are, I know a couple of people say Probellum have given them the best offer, and that's where they're likely to go. So yeah, next year is going to be interesting, especially where they land, which broadcast their home shows are going to be on.
It seems like there's a lot of platforms at the moment. It's probably busier than ever, I think. Yeah. It just seems with all these people coming on, and they've branded that quite well, haven't they? And it's sticking out well. And like you say, they're releasing things every day. It looks quite well organised, and it looks like they've got a good team and structure. And like you said, you probably think they'd go bang into a big event, but maybe they're doing it wisely. They understand they've got to build it. It seems like they've got a good team around them. It's quite clever what they seem to be doing. Like you say, they're offering good deals. So maybe they're offering the good deals, but coming in slowly, building the shows up and putting the name out. But it's another exciting platform, really, isn't it? Again, there seems to be a lot of competition at the moment, but it's good for boxing, for the boxers.
Yeah, it seems great with the boxers. I can perhaps understand, John, why they're going pretty small in Sunderland, because they're pretty new here. And let's not start doing the 26.2 miles marathon when we haven't got started. I can understand what they're doing. Round 5, and another one, a bit of a topic you like talking about, John, the lightweights. Hainey beat the lightweights.
Yeah, I swore never to speak about these fellas again until we started fighting each other. But we have seen a little bit of mixing and matching, not between the top guys, but a couple of good fights in recent weeks. So I'll break that little ban. Devin Hainey last night with Jojo Diaz. Devin Haney's such a talented boxer, isn't he? He's in the top level of the sport. But when I look at those guys, the lightweights, I think he's the one that we're all going to be targeting. I've seen him fight now. Linares hurt him when he could draw him into a fight and get involved. Jojo Diaz had big moments last night when he could get him into a fight. And I'll look at people like George Kambosos. He'll be licking his lips watching that fight from Hainey. He'll know that he can make Hainey fight. He can make him engage. And that'll play to Kambosos' strengths. Someone like Tank would love to exchange with Hainey. He would love that. And I just wonder if, as talented as Hainey is, has he got that equalizer? Has he got that dig? Has he got that robustness to really mix it with these explosive top guys at lightweight?
Alex?
The lightweights, I haven't been watching as much, but you can see Hainey is. I'm not caught with that fight. He's athletic, obviously, and then you've got the guys around him. And you know what I was thinking when he was saying that? What guys have we got in the UK? Maybe you sort of Maxi Hughes. Would he get to him, break his heart? Maybe he hasn't got the firepower to, but he's that kind of. He's showing so much character recently in these fights. He's putting these guys over. He's breaking their hearts and. I'd love to see someone like that. We saw it over the years. Maybe sometimes we've seen them step too far, like Howard Clark and Fernando Vargas. But I'd love to see someone like a Maxi Hughes go in there with one of these big names like your Haneys and that, and just turn them over with the heart and desire that like Maxi's got. Well, he's done it with the sort of gatekeepers recently. Be nice to let him off the leash and go and see what he could do with someone like Haney, who's shown vulnerabilities in the past and stuff.
There's far less deserving cases than Maxi Hughes that have gone and fought these guys. These guys, they get out of Mexico and South America are like 23-1, who we know Maxi would be. But you know what? From your epic rant the other week about these guys not fighting each other, John, I think with the Kambosos win last night and Haney, I haven't seen the fight last night. I've read 2 or 3 journalists whose stuff I do read, and that they been okay about him, but sort of suggested maybe he's not this demigod that some people are telling you. I think suddenly now, John, over the last 2 months since your rant, there's more chances of these guys meeting because they all think they're going to beat Kambosos because there's a boxing snobbery. Because he's from Australia and not the Bronx, he can't fight still to a lot of people. It's the shit we get in boxing. It's like if he, I could have got...
Yeah, could have gone. We went way over anyway. Go on, Alex. It's the last.
Alex, how you win, how you lose. Over to you, Alex. Jack versus Lejarraga.
Big step up in class. He made it competitive a lot of times. There was a few variables like there always is when you fight away from home, but he'd done himself proud, and Kerman, what a legend. He come to the hospital. He was waiting for Jack just whilst he got obviously his mandatory checkovers and stuff. Made him pizza afterwards, and he's just a gentleman. But yeah, it's like if you look back over the years, look at Winky Wright. He went and fought Vasquez. He was slipping on the canvas. I think there was probably about 5 fights he lost to the South American, 5 knockdowns against the South American. It just. The canvas were very slippy. His legs did go a couple of times. There was a couple where I thought it was a bit dubious, but Jack didn't complain. He was. Kerman's a tough. We probably underestimated him slightly with the Jez Smith. He come back slightly better, slightly cuter. It was a big task. Jack showed formidable amounts of heart and desire, and. I'm just proud that he's ticked a bucket list. You're talking about a young kid who had a very poor amateur record at the beginning, brought it through, started beating all the best kids, Scott Fitzgerald, Jordan Reynolds, turned professional, had a bit of bad luck, the COVID. I got it with the Metcalf fight, the Fowler fight, he broke his foot the week before. So he's not had the big platform, and he got one of the biggest platforms against a bit of a formidable puncher who's only lost to the world rated David Aviesian. So it was a massive task. Like I say, a bit like when Ricky Burns as well fought Carl Johansson, and he got dropped a few times at Leeds. It was just a step too far against a good puncher. But he showed he won a lot of people over. That stadium just it was quite intimidating going in. Going out, it was, the respect, you could just feel it walking out. they all come over, they're all clapping. You know, it was unbelievable, to be honest.
You know what? All I've heard is good things about Lejarraga from Bradley Skeet's team there. They said they were brilliant with him. You know, really, when Alan Smith was with him. But you know what? I think a couple of things. That the other night, that fight showed how you win and how you lose in this sport. We've had the crap from Teofimo Lopez last week, the crap from Deontay Wilder, a man who Jack and Lejarraga can only dream of reaching those heights, with the greatest respect to them, the way they behaved in winning. We've seen fighters talking trash even when they won fights. That is how you lose. And Jack's Facebook post yesterday was most probably one of the finest things I've ever, and I mean this, and I've even made a post about it, I've read on Facebook. That's how you lose as a man, and how you win as a man. Lejarraga going to the hospital, driving you back to the hotel, making sure you're safe, cooking your pizza. That's what a real man's about, not this shit from Lopez and his dad and what we've had from Wilder. And you know what, as we said earlier, there's, you know, for Jack, there's a way back. Maybe he needs a cut. Look, it was a heavy knockout in the end. You know, he was tired, great shot, and everything. But you give him a couple 6-rounders, he's straight back in the British eliminator picture. You could even have a VIP clash against Mason Cartwright for some sort of eliminator. There's fights out there for him, you know. Whereas one of someone like Lyndon last night, it's going to be a lot harder because it was such a conclusive defeat. You know, it's mad what a defeat can do for your career. What was your opinion of it, John?
You know what, Alex? What must make you proud as well? I know he showed heart and stuff, but it was one of maybe the best Flatley I've seen. You know, his boxing was great. His jab was brilliant. He just couldn't get Lejarraga. He got his respect as a fighter, but he just couldn't keep him off, and Lejarraga was willing to take a jab to give one Mosney, and that's why it came apart for Jack. But under that pressure, in that atmosphere, and under that firepower, I thought he held himself together brilliant, listened to you, and boxed as well as I've seen Jack box. Because I texted him a week and said, I know you've been working on inside work with him, and that might come in handy at some point. But Jack boxed well. I think you should be really proud of him there.
Yeah, I felt like he nullified him on the inside really well when he was there. Yeah. You know, Lejarraga's best shot is probably the body shot.
Yeah.
And his right hand's probably nearly the second best, you know, close second. But the body shot he's got, he's just ferocious, that left hook to the body. You can see every fight he hurts someone to the body with it. Jack completely nullified the body shot really well. Nothing was hurting but his head, you know. He couldn't land the left hook to the body. But as you say, Jack showed some good spurts of his great boxing ability. He's feinting, he's jabbing. When he was moving his head and using his feet, he didn't get stuck on the ropes. You know, that ring was tiny, which it was always going to be. But Jack stayed off the ropes really well. When he was on the ropes, he blocked and pulled and moved. And yeah, he showed some really good glimpses, and as Steve says, the more he gets a couple more 6s, we'll see even more of that. You know, Jack knows now, he believes in himself, he knows he can mix it at this level. Some people would have got wiped out early, like we've said. You know, we've had lots of Brits go over and they've been beat early. You know, some good fighters, and he's beat some. He's got a crazy record, but Jack was not intimidated. He loved it. He was probably slightly nervous, but he wasn't intimidated. He really enjoyed it.
Alex, having been so close to Lejarraga and stuff and seen him for a couple of days before the weigh-in, how hard must it have been for him to do welterweight?
Unbelievable, because, I mean, he struggled to do light middle, so we were sort of banking on, do you know what, he's tight at the weight, but he come in that ring, he was massive. I didn't expect him to actually be as big as he was, because he used to make welterweight, and he's a bit of a freak. Same with his punching power. He has really good punch, as we saw. You know, he does have good punching power. I think sometimes he might make the weight wrong, so his punching power. But whatever happened, he was strong that night, up close. I mean, I saw Golovkin punch Martin up close when they fought at Monaco, and his punches are better, Golovkin, but power-wise, you know, you can hear the punches footing. We had Mike Jackson in the corner. He's been been around boxing for years, been lots of big fights, and he was like, he could hear the punches as well and see them, and he was saying, this guy really can punch, and he's quite formidable. His powers, it's really, he's got good power.
Yeah, brilliant. Well,
I just wonder if that getting done by Avanesian in 2 rounds or around whatever it was, I just wonder if that might have been down to weight and he's actually been underrated because of that. And at light middle, we might see him as a different animal.
Yeah, I think in making weight, he definitely welterweight would have really made a big difference. And I'm taking nothing away from David. We've seen how good he is with Josh Taylor and that, but he's a brute at light middle. Yeah, he is. He's a brute. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, thanks for joining us today, Alex. I hope, disappointing night Friday. I hope talking to us too about a bit of boxing has cheered you up. I'll let you go now because I know you've got shopping and your daughters to pick up and everything. There's no stop for you. Thanks very much for coming on, and we'll get you on again earlier in the new year. You brought a lot of great insight as always, especially on Jack the other night. John Evans, thanks very much as always, and tell Woody to get you a new tracksuit top, mate, because you're playing that at one every week now. Thanks everyone else for listening. It's been a really, really good 6 rounds of talk. Thanks very much, and we'll speak to you next week. The final one before we sign off for Christmas. Thanks very much.
For all boxing info, news, and latest interviews, amateur and pro across the north, click and subscribe. VIP Boxing Promotions. Also, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.